And Substitute House Bill 1240 will be advanced to third reading. Hearing no objections, so ordered. Substitute House Bill 1240 on third reading and final passage. Remarks. The good member from the 21st District, Representative Peterson.
Thank you, Speaker Jenkins. You know, this can be an interesting place, as you know. You think you've got a speech lined up, you're ready to go on the floor on obviously a very important piece of information, and then you get a little more information that kind of changes your thought pattern. Just a couple hours ago, Speaker Jenkins, the good member from the 49th, informed us that the former member from the 49th, former Representative Jim Muller, passed away. And then somebody sent me a link to an article in the Columbia newspaper dated January 15th, 2016, that Representative Jim Muller is introducing legislation to ban assault weapons. Madam Speaker, I had the honor of serving with Jim Muller, and one of my colleagues, who I don't know who did this, put this bow tie on my desk. And while this bow tie would probably offend the former representative from the 49th, I felt it important to honor his legacy in this little way that I could, because this has been a long journey. I first introduced this piece of legislation under my prime sponsorship the following year after a shooting in my community in Mukilteo, where a young man of 19 years old shot up a house party of kids who had just graduated from high school, and they were getting together on a warm summer's eve to talk about life and talk about what the future is going to bring to them. Well, three of those people, Anna and Jake and Jordan, don't have a future anymore. One other, Will, was shot in the back, but fortunately survived. This has been happening in our communities and happening around the state and around the country for far too long. Did a little bit of research, and in 2021, there were, I think, 697 mass shootings around the country. Last year, there was 648, give or take. This year in 2023, to date, we have nearly 70 mass shootings. We are on a clip to surpass those numbers. And we've seen it. You and I have seen the marches, Speaker Jenkins. We've seen the kids walking out of school. We've seen the kids amassed on the mall in Washington, D.C. We see them. We hear them. We have to pass this legislation. Please vote yes.
Further remarks, the member from the 19th District, Representative Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This is a bad bill. Please vote no. The right of the individual citizen to bear arms in defense of himself and the state shall not be impaired. That, of course, is Article 1, Section 24 of the state constitution. Madam Speaker, this policy impairs your right to bear arms in defense of yourself and the state. It is unconstitutional. Madam Speaker, we have experimented in this nation with so-called assault weapon bans in our past. As I think everyone on this floor knows, in the 1990s, at the federal level, we experimented with a so-called assault weapon ban. Didn't have a great effect on crime rates. To the extent there is data that's relevant, it's confounding and inconclusive. It didn't put a big dent in violent crime. And ultimately, the federal government abandoned that experiment as not effective for public safety, not effective for decreasing crime, and an infringement of constitutional rights of the people. Madam Speaker, none of us countenances violent crime. But the question, Madam Speaker, is how do we best address violent crime in our public policy? And this bill makes the same mistake that many others do. It assumes that by restricting the choices and options of law-abiding citizens in how they choose to protect themselves, it will somehow affect the behavior of psychopaths and criminals and people bent on making mayhem. They're two different sorts, Madam Speaker. Let's not penalize law-abiding citizens in an effort to deter the actions of criminals. Vote no on the bill, and let's pursue more effective ways to fight crime in our communities.
Further remarks? Seeing none, the good member from the 35th District, Representative Couture.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, firearms are the great equalizer. Firearms help the weakest among us. They help against all kinds of predators, whether they be man or beast. And you've heard tonight some of the stories of rising crime and predators in our community. And these firearms seek to level the playing field for people and communities all across our state. And in this bill, Madam Speaker, is an inflammatory intent section that disparages law-abiding gun owners all across our state. Law-abiding gun owners who have done nothing wrong, but now, as a result of this bill, will be punished. Madam Speaker, Article 1, Section 1 of our state constitution says that all political power is inherent in the people, and all governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed. And with an emergency clause in this bill, we have stripped away an important democratic process for the people in our state to have their voices heard. Madam Speaker, I recently worked on a bill called Nothing About Us Without Us, and this is without us. I've heard tonight that these are weapons of war. Now, Madam Speaker, I was in the military. I had to qualify and shoot an M16 multiple times. I had to carry one while on watch. These are not weapons of war. This non-exhaustive list of the most popular firearms in our society, these are never used in a war. These are used at our homes to defend ourselves. It could be the single mother who defends her family. It could be a hiker that defends himself from a cougar. And most importantly, Madam Speaker, in Washington State, we have the lowest per capita police in all of the nation. And in my district, the great 35th, we have the lowest per capita police in Washington. And we simply cannot leave people like the people in my district defenseless against crime. They have to be able to defend themselves. And will this bill, or bills like it, save any more lives? I'm not convinced that they will. This bill is unconstitutional.
The member's time has expired. Further remarks? The good member from the 46th District, Representative Farivar.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Growing up in America is different. We have cell phones, we have the internet, and we have active shooter drills. Madam Speaker, I've been in a lockdown from a mass shooting, and not that long ago. I know what it's like to huddle in a classroom with my peers and pray that death does not come through that door. My generation and that of the generation after me have grown up with mass shootings normalized. Death, sadness, thoughts and prayers, and then back to business. We barely have time to pause and reflect and mourn the loss before we move on to the next tragedy. Madam Speaker, I'm here to say that this is not good enough. Our young people deserve better, and our young people are saying that it is not good enough. They don't understand why we continue to allow weapons of war in our communities. 6 times as many people are shot and killed when a mass shooter uses an assault weapon. 6 times. Let's send a message to our young people that we hear them, that we value them, and that we care about them more than the ability to have a weapon of war. Madam Speaker, the evidence is clear. This bill will save lives, and we have to make this decision knowing the experiences, knowing that lived experience of our young people in schools today. Please vote yes. Thank you.
Further remarks? The member from the 25th District, Representative Chambers.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm urging you to vote no on this bill today. I'm going to be no because this bill, Madam Speaker, is an infringement on constitutionally protected rights, and it's likely to be overturned due to the Supreme Court decision in the Bruin case, which states that this is a violation of the constitutionally protected 14th Amendment. Permission to read, Madam Speaker.
Please proceed.
And in that case, the U.S. Supreme Court stated that this was preventing law-abiding citizens with ordinary self-defense needs from exercising their Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms in public. Madam Speaker, there weren't any mass shootings in Washington state last year, but there were record murders. The murder rate in Washington last year, Madam Speaker, it exceeded the previous record rate set in 1994, almost 30 years ago. And we're back to where we started, concerned about public safety. Public safety is on the hearts and minds of moms and dads all across Washington state. Washingtonians want this body, want this legislature to address public safety, and we're not doing it with this bill. Moms and dads are concerned about what's really going on out there. Just ask John and Amber, constituents that were down here today, to talk to us about their 12-year-old little girl that was killed 1 year and 1 month ago by a convicted felon with an illegal firearm in a stolen vehicle. Ask them if this bill is addressing their public safety need. Vote no.
Further remarks? Seeing none. The good member from the 26th District, Representative Caldier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Part of this legislative process is listening to people from different perspectives and making sure that we're passing out good policy. And it's not confusing to me that, you know, there's a whole heck of a lot more members on your side of the aisle than there are on the other side of the aisle. Not confusing. And I've heard quite a few times of concerns about mass shootings. And I am also very concerned about those as well. But I'm also concerned about people wanting to defend themselves, because we also have to take that perspective into consideration. And my concern is that people who come in to someone's home and want to hurt someone, they're coming in wanting to assault them. So for example, with my stalker, if I'm in bed at night and he comes into my home, he wants to hurt me. That's not confusing. He has a huge advantage over me. I don't know he's coming. I can't see that far. I need to be able to level the playing field in some way, shape, or form. And a baseball bat isn't going to do it. And Madam Speaker, this bill not only violates our constitutional rights, but it doesn't take into perspective the public safety of people who have already sought protective orders. And I offered an amendment, which unfortunately was scoped, or was going to be scoped. And it's very sad because I actually think that there's quite a few of your members that would have voted for that. I think a lot of us would have liked to protect people who've had to seek protective orders and are scared for their safety.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm just saying, we at least need to take that perspective into consideration. You have the numbers, not confusing. But it would be helpful to at least make sure that we're helping protect people in situations like mine. Thank you.
Further remarks, the member from the 6th District, Representative Graham.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The scariest part of this policy is that this is going to be a criminal's dream. Madam Speaker, we have a gang problem in Washington State. Not too awfully long ago, Madam Speaker, on a Friday night, midnight, I'm laying in bed with my husband and I hear something very strange. It sounded like somebody was on our roof. Well, that's second story. How did that happen? So I opened up my daughter's door to her bedroom, and lo and behold, there's a man outside her window kicking our house and going ballistic. It turns out, Madam Speaker, that this was a gang member that had a fight with the girlfriend next door. Why he was on our roof, I can't tell you. But what I can tell you, Madam Speaker, is that it was frightening having that man outside my daughter's bedroom window. We did what is expected of us to do. We called 911. I live in the city, 10 minutes away from the police station. The first call we make, okay, we're sending somebody. So we wait, trying to figure out what do we do? This guy's not leaving. Half hour goes by, no police. Hour goes by, no police. We call again, we're sending somebody. Hour and a half goes by, still nobody comes. Madam Speaker, we live in the city, and we were forced to have to go out there and deal with gang members ourselves, because when we picked up the phone to call 911, they can't send officers they don't have. That's the reality, Madam Speaker, of what is coming. That is the reality of what we are facing. And Madam Speaker, as much as we have legislation that gets passed connected to this policy, where we just had the act to release gangs, rapists, and Freddy Krueger from prison that are going to wind up in our neighborhoods, Madam Speaker, people are going to say no. We have a right to defend ourselves and our family, Madam Speaker. Most people don't want to break the law, but if it comes down to protecting their family or visiting them at a gravesite, they're going to choose protecting their family. Please vote no on this bill. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Further remarks, the good member from the 36th District, Representative Barry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Firearms are now the leading cause of death among children in America. As the mother of a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old, this is devastating to me. Mass shootings are too much of a reality for so many of us today. 12 years ago, my life changed forever on a bright, sunny morning in Tucson, Arizona, when a gunman opened fire on a constituent event of my boss, Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. Gabby was shot in the head. My friend and colleague, Gabe Zimmerman, was killed. Gabe is the first congressional staffer to be killed in the line of duty. 5 other people died that day. 2 of my colleagues, Ron and Pam, were shot. In total, 18 people were shot, and later 31 shell casings were recovered at the scene. It wasn't until the shooter reloaded that 4 innocent bystanders were able to tackle him to the ground. It was then that the blood and the carnage ended that day. Assault weapons are the weapons of choice for mass shootings, and 6 times as many people are killed when assault weapons are used in mass shootings, like the one that killed my friend Gabe. Gun violence is preventable. This bill will save lives. I'm voting yes tonight for our kids. I'm voting yes tonight for my friend Gabe, and I'm voting yes tonight for the thousands of Americans who are killed and silenced by gun violence in this country every day. Please vote yes.
Further remarks, the good member from the 14th District, Representative Corry.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm rising to urge a no on House Bill 1240 this evening. We've heard a lot of stories from both sides of the aisle around how this bill will impact or potentially impact them. And I truly believe that everyone's hearts here are in the right place. I also truly believe that this bill will not have the intended impact that people are saying it will. I think that this bill fundamentally will punish law-abiding gun owners, and it will not seek to stop criminals in their use of weapons. I believe that this bill violates both the U.S. and Washington State Constitution very plainly. And I believe that with subsequent challenges currently in the court, this bill will be overturned. So to that end, in order for us to combat these things, Madam Speaker, I believe we need to have a renewed focus on criminals and crime and enforcing the law. We've had amendments proposed before that would add increased sentence enhancements for use of a weapon in the act of a crime. We've rejected those. This bill won't address those type of situations. What it will address is a variety of issues where law-abiding gun owners who are trying to do the right thing will be prevented from executing their constitutional rights, whether it's for family safety, shooting sports, defense, whatever that is, they will be harmed. At the meantime, we're sending another message in this body, one where we're letting people off, we're loosening standards, and we're making it easier for people to go free. I think that these messages stand in conflict, and until we resolve that, a bill like this won't help stop criminals from using guns in the commission of crime. I'm urging us not to hurt law-abiding gun owners at the expense of criminals. Please vote no.
Further remarks, the good member from the 25th District, Representative Jacobsen.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We're going to pass this bill off the House floor, and I'm going to tell you, I think, Madam Speaker, why that makes me sad. It makes me sad that we're passing this bill off the House floor with good intentions, because I don't think this is going to do anything to solve our problem. And we're going to leave here, and we're going to think we've done something, and we're going to have missed opportunities, Madam Speaker. If I thought for 1 nanosecond that this would help, I would be glad to vote for it. It's not about me defending keeping a hobby. It's not about that, Madam Speaker, sorry. A contraction of Madam Speaker, maybe ma'am, I don't know. Criminals, they don't follow laws. Mass shooters, they don't follow laws. And you know where they're more likely to commit these crimes? In gun-free zones. And you know where we have higher crime rates? In places with lots of gun laws. So, Madam Speaker, it's demonstrable that we that this policy just doesn't make sense. Our job here is not just to identify a problem, but our job here is to come up with logical solutions that make sense. And on the face of it, this doesn't make sense because criminals don't follow laws. A gun is a tool. It's neither good nor bad. And it's wrong to take away tools from law-abiding citizens that could be used for good and leave criminals free, as we are in this state, Madam Speaker, to run away from the law and to not be pursued by police and to not get sentence enhancements for gun crimes. We're leaving criminals off and we're taking away guns, a tool, from reasonable people who want to use them for good purposes. So I urge a no vote. Thank you.
Further remarks, the member from the 19th District, Representative McIntyre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good evening. I will be voting no on 1240 this evening, and here's why. There has been a claim made several times this evening that this legislation will save lives, but this comes without any assurances, without any evidence. In fact, similar proposals that have been put into law in other states have had the opposite effect. We've seen the places that have the most restrictive policies on private citizens to be able to own and bear arms have had spikes, and the highest spikes, in violent crime and murder. And so while the intent is great, that we want to diminish human suffering and save lives, this bill will not do that. Although we're trying to do those things and save lives as legislators, our fundamental oath is to the Constitution, state and federal. The claim has been made on the other side, on this side of the aisle, that this bill is unconstitutional. Normally, in debating situations, when a claim is made and it is not rebutted, it is assumed to be true. It is...
Please speak to the policy, not to the process.
Madam Speaker, the bill on its face is unconstitutional. I can see that. I hope you can see that as well. It is unconstitutional. We think that by passing this, we will make people safer, but we could cut out the middleman, Madam Speaker. We could pass a bill that makes murder illegal. We could do that. But we assume that bad guys follow the law. It's the same with this bill as well. Making it so that we can't transfer or purchase semi-automatic rifles, we assume that somehow that's going to stop bad people from doing what they want to do. We don't have a problem with rifles, Madam Speaker. We have a problem with moral decay in our society. That's the problem. That's where the real heart of this lies. We have a decay in values in society, and the tools that we have, the weapons that we have the right to own, that's immaterial. You go to Switzerland, everyone's carrying a semi-automatic rifle. It's a very peaceful place. There are other places where there aren't very many weapons at all, and yet there's horrible crime and violence that happens. Weapons in the hands of private citizens is not the factor here, and passing this will not make us safer. I'm going to thoroughly enjoy seeing this get overturned in court.
Further remarks, the good member from the 49th District, Representative Stonier.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We've heard some debate about a number of things this evening: emotions, rights, rational thinking, and definitions of assault weapons. We're here to debate whether or not these weapons should be illegal. That is true. There's no question. Let's get back to these emotions. There is no doubt that emotion arises due to the senseless loss of life. And that can be motivating, just like a number of other things that bring us here to do work for the people of this state. And I know that I don't know a lot about guns, but what I do know and don't know about guns, Madam Speaker, has no impact, has no mitigating impact on my ability to understand the impact to our state and to the people of this country when weapons like this are available freely, easily to people who will use them to do harm. Let's talk about our rights. Madam Speaker, my kids, my students, your son, they have the right to go to school without fearing what will happen when they get there, and as parents, without us fearing whether or not they will come home. Our friends have the right to go to a nightclub, to go to their place of worship, to get their nails done at the mall, without fearing what will happen as a result of too easy of access to these defined assault weapons. So yeah, we can be driven by our interest in protecting our rights, but these are the rights I'm here to protect with my yes vote tonight. These are the rights I'm here to protect. Not what I can purchase or use, but where I can go, where I can pray, where I can learn. And I want that for every other Washingtonian. Please vote yes on this life-saving bill.
Further remarks, the member from the 9th District, Representative Dye.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Tonight we have heard that this bill is about banning access to weapons so that we can stop mass shootings in our schools, and it's a laudable goal. But is that really the correct policy to accomplish that goal? We've heard that women are purchasing firearms at a higher rate now than ever before, that 3.6 million weapons have been purchased by women in the United States since 2019. And we've been told in the intent section that there's a disparaging comment that young men are inclined to become violent because they have access to these weapons. But I think that we're missing the point. I think that there's something going on deeper in our culture as I have studied and learned more about the issues that are happening to our boys and our men. There's something that happens in the psyche of people that they start to realize a sense of hopelessness when these disparagements are culturally systemic from the time they're young. And there's abuse and neglect in their home. And they state at that point of despair that they feel useless and they feel worthless. And in that sense, they feel like, do they really matter? And they imagine themselves in a heroic display. And it may be that it's more that we ourselves are not meeting the needs properly. And perhaps we should look at that first before we start reaching down deep into the shifting sands of the social construct, a promise that is inherent in our founding first rights. That point where we believe that these were such a solid foundational baseline for truth and freedom. And instead of doing that to all citizens of this state, maybe we should look at deeply into the souls of our young men and question ourselves, are we meeting their needs? I beg you, Madam Speaker, please vote no on this policy. Thank you.
Further remarks? Seeing none, the good member from the 20th District, Representative Orcutt.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And maybe it's perfect timing that I'm the next speaker up. I've been listening to the debate on the floor tonight, and I've heard a lot about the Second Amendment, and I feel very strongly about the Second Amendment, very much in support of it. But I want you to know I'm not only hearing what's being said on this side of the aisle. I've been listening to what the gentlelady from the 36th has said, and the 46th, and now recently the 49th. Kids are screaming out. They're marching in the streets. They're asking us to do something. But Madam Speaker, that's something that we need to do is not this bill. We do need to listen to them. But Madam Speaker, I think we've got to go a step even further than that. Because the kids who don't feel safe are not the only ones who have been screaming out. In fact, the very ones who have been perpetrating these crimes, misusing these firearms, are screaming out. They are crying out for us to help them. I believe that we need to better understand why they're crying out, why they're so frustrated, and why they believe this is the only way to deal with whatever frustration they're feeling. We need that level of understanding if we're really going to solve the problem of mass shootings. There are so many people out there who have these types of firearms who never use them for mass shootings. So the real question here is those who are using them for these types of shootings, why are they? And what can we do to prevent them from having that frustration? Because if it doesn't manifest itself this way, it will manifest itself some other way, with consequences equally as deadly. Madam Speaker, this bill will not make us safer. It may make us feel safer, but it won't make us feel safer. We need to get down and understand the true root cause of the violence to truly make our society safer. Please vote no on the bill tonight.
Further remarks, the member from the 14th District, Representative Mosbrucker.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I appreciate your patience and indulgence in listening to our concerns. Madam Speaker, the world's a scary place. Washington State is a scary place. I'm fortunate to grow up when I did. As crime, violent crime, murder, rape, aggravated assault, robbery, as these crimes escalate, it's at the exact same time that the amount of law enforcement officers we have to keep us safe and keep themselves safe by protecting each other is down at, as you've heard repeatedly, an all-time low. The Second Amendment grants us the right and says that gun rights shall not be infringed. I think this bill infringes. I have a concealed carry. I have it so that I can be safe. And my father, I had an amazing father who taught me to shoot guns, all guns, to store guns properly, and to follow the laws regarding being a responsible gun owner. We went camping, we practiced on pop cans, we went hunting, although I was usually never invited back because I would be as loud as possible as to not see a deer and have him shoot it. So we would take my brother instead. But I remember watching just him shoot, and it was just something that it made me feel safe. I knew I was safe, he was safe, and we knew how to do it properly. We used to go to gun ranges, and we still do, and we would shoot assault rifles. He would train me, this is exactly how you do it. This is how you take the gun apart. This is how you put it back together. This is how you clean the gun. So I believe in that constitutional right for us to carry, and this bill, as it stands, does not. I think that what people don't understand is that I'm afraid they don't understand that the importance of the Second Amendment that we're talking about that relates to this underlying bill, and that is that we don't understand its importance until, Madam Speaker, it's too late. And I really don't want the criminals who harm us and do school shootings to be the only ones standing who still hold an assault rifle and know how to use it properly. Please vote no.
Further remarks, the good member from the 11th District, Representative Hackney.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I previously served as a war crimes prosecutor at the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in The Hague, Netherlands. I prosecuted cases that included gory scenes of mass murder. I have held the hand of witnesses who struggled to testify about loved ones whose bodies were literally mutilated by assault weapons, only to return home to the United States and find that our neighbors and our children are facing a similar reality. These weapons of war have no business in our community. Washington must do better. I support this common sense policy. I support this policy because it will not lead to new mass shootings every month. I support this policy because it will not turn our schools into war zones. I support this policy because it will save lives. Madam Speaker, just like the child victims of Uvalde, Texas, we don't have time to waste. We have to act now. We have to act now before it's too late. I urge your support on this important legislation.
Further remarks? The good member from the 13th District, Representative Dent.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I do quite often on a long debate like this, I sit and I write out notes, and I'm going to have a plan of speech, and it always changes. I was thinking about firearm as a tool that I use on my ranch to defend my animals, my livestock. Most of you know here that I raise buffalo, and they're got to be just some of the coolest animals in the world, but they look to me for protection. And I like to think about defending my family, and I've done that. Because I live in a large rural county where a call to 911 does not result in immediate assistance. No, Madam Speaker, I've heard it said here by a couple of my colleagues in the last few minutes. We have some social ills in this country. They're the problems. We surround our young people with movies that are full of violence. I sit down and I watched a movie not too long ago, and I lost track of how many people died in this movie. I mean, it was just disgusting. We've let our young people lose their ability to be parents and to raise their children with respect for others. That concerns me. That's my concern. Madam Speaker, and you and I have worked on some issues around mental health since I've been here. And that's a crisis in our country. It's truly a crisis. And that concerns me. Abolishing an object is not going to fix those issues. We're going to fix those issues and thinking about how we can change how society views and how society respects each other. Madam Speaker, I'm encouraging a no vote on this. Thank you.
Further remarks? The good member from the 39th District, Representative Eslick.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm rising in opposition for House Bill 1240. I've listened to all the speeches tonight, and there's some concerning things. One is against the Second Amendment, but I'm also worried about the mass shooters that are going to get out in a few years with the policies that we've passed here this year. I'm also worried about the word pistol that is mentioned 5 times in this bill. One of those times it gives a definition is a firearm under 16 inches. And Madam Speaker, I own a pistol. And when I was 29 years old, I moved to Washington State to buy a tavern in a logging town. And some weekends we had loggers in there. Some weekends we had bikers in there. And some of the special weekends we had both of them in there. And the only time that I was really afraid for my life was when Rodney came in on a Wednesday night and I was all alone. Now, Rodney was inebriated and I couldn't serve him. And he pulled out a knife and he said he also had a gun and I'd better give him a drink. Now, he was standing between me and the phone. In those days, it was a phone on the wall. We stood and argued for a few minutes until somebody else walked in, and he backed off. I had a chance to get to the phone and call the police, and they were there in 2 minutes. This was a few years ago. I prosecuted Rodney, but not without purchasing a pistol before that day in court, because I was that afraid. Now, I'm worried about this bill, because it mentions pistol. And I'm worried about the women in the state of Washington for their safety. So I'm standing before you today to ask you to vote no for the women of Washington state and their protection. Thank you.
Further remarks? The good member from the 4th District, Representative Christian.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Bad bill, vote no. Madam Speaker, I alluded last night to my joining of the Air Force on July 3rd, 1984, and I stood in front of a flag much like the one to your right, the flag of the United States of America. And I raised my hand and I swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution. Madam Speaker, just a few short miles north of here is a massive joint base full of proud men and women who raised their hands in front of the same symbolic flag and said the same oath. They swore it. And in my area, Spokane County, we have an Air Force base filled, once again, with proud men and women who love this country and swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And because so many of us love this state, we chose to retire here. In fact, Madam Speaker, I would venture to say there's hundreds of thousands of veterans in this great state who are civically involved and love this country, this state, and the United States Constitution. They still took the same oath to protect and defend the Constitution and the entire Constitution. You see, Madam Speaker, the Constitution is not a buffet dinner. You don't just go in, walk down the line, and pick up what you want. The First Amendment that allows us to speak in this place freely is just as important, Madam Speaker, as the Second Amendment that allows us to defend this country. Just as important. This bill will limit our rights and our ability to bear arms. It is a bad bill, Madam Speaker, and for the men and women of this state who served and swore an oath to protect that right, I urge a no vote.
Further remarks, the good member from the 41st District, Representative Senn.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As a mother, nothing breaks my heart more than asking my kids how school went and having them share that they had a lockdown drill, let alone a lockdown. In addition to learning about math and art and history, all the things they need to grow, they're also learning how to play dead. But they're not taking it lying down. They are standing up and they are walking out because this is their emergency clause. Have no doubt this is a generational concern. I was thankfully able to attend my daughter's speech tournament the other day. And you know what? 3 out of the 5 final speeches were about school shootings. I kid you not. Children go to school to learn and have a better future, and our inaction is taking that future away. I am sick and tired of hearing from youth who think adults are not listening to them. We are listening. I am sick and tired of hearing that all this will do is take guns away from law-abiding citizens. Guess what? The moment before someone commits a mass shooting in Uvalde, in Parkland, in Las Vegas, at Cafe Racer, they were law-abiding citizens. It only takes a split second to go from law-abiding citizen to mass murderer. That's why we don't have time to delay. We don't have time to expand access to assault weapons bans, to assault weapons. We must act now. Madam Speaker, please join me for common sense, for our kids, for their futures. Vote yes.
Further remarks, the good member from the 20th District, Representative Abbarno.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm asking for a no vote on this bill, and the reason why is there are constitutional issues. I know that, and I know they're very deeply rooted. But I think there's a failure sometimes for individuals to listen to each other. It's easier to jump on social media, maybe tweet out things that attack each other, and we don't sit around a table anymore, and that's unfortunate. The fact of the matter is that this bill is not about mass shootings. The intent might indicate it is, and honestly, mass shootings, based on the National Institute of Justice, are committed by 52% Caucasian, 21% African American, and so on and so forth. But the one unifying statistic is that 65% of mass shootings are committed by those who have criminal history. 67% of those who commit mass shootings have domestic violence in their background. The majority of these mass shootings are done by people with criminal history and signs, terrible signs that we should all have noticed. But this bill is about so much more. This is not about mass shootings. This is about distributing guns, distributing firearms. This is about law-abiding citizens. We can't talk about a mass shooting and an individual who commits it having a criminal history and not go back to the beginning and the fact that our judicial system has allowed that person and failed them, and that the state of Washington in cases has failed them. We relieve them of their victim impact fees so they don't have to pay for their crimes. We lower enhancements for criminals committing gun crimes and drug crimes around schools. And then we talk about mass shootings are done by those who have a criminal history. But what we're doing in the policy is that we're not holding criminals accountable in a state with the least amount of law enforcement officers. Yes, there are constitutional issues. Yes, there are history and traditions of responsible firearm use throughout this state. But there's also the safety issue, the public safety issue, the policy of keeping people safe. And we need to start choosing victims over criminals and not the other way around. We cannot continue to prioritize the rights of criminals over the victims. Vote no.
Further remarks, the member from the 7th District, Representative Maycumber.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. You know, in the years past, I used to, when you hear these horrible, horrible and tragic stories of these gun crimes, they seem to be centered in certain locations. Locations where this policy has actually been for many, many years. That's California. I looked it up. It's one of the deadliest locations in the United States. You are 175% higher to be a victim of a violent crime in Oakland than anywhere else in the United States, Madam Speaker. You have to register all your guns within 60 days. Madam Speaker, in Detroit, 48 out of 100,000 people are victims of violent crimes, and you have to register all your guns within 10 days. And Madam Speaker, in Chicago, you have to possess a firearms owner identification card. And in 2022, there were 637 homicides and 2,600 and some shootings. Madam Speaker, if this policy made anyone safer, it would have done it in these other states, in these other locations where this exact same language is placed on the books. But it's not. Madam Speaker, I'd like to mention a couple other statistics. In the state of Washington, your firearms death from the year 2020 for the CDC is 10.9 out of 100,000, and that includes suicides. Yeah, that's a lot. Unfortunately, Madam Speaker, before the Blake decision, it was 22. 10 for firearm deaths and 22 out of 100,000 for overdoses. That number has skyrocketed. The CDC hasn't updated its website. I will never tell you a statistic that hasn't been from a federally recognized group like the CDC. But that number is skyrocketing, and it's shocking. And drug overdose in the state of Washington, you're more likely to die from multiple times over than a firearm death, Madam Speaker. And that's not a violent crime, Madam Speaker. Those are suicides inside of there. So, Madam Speaker, if the point of saving lives, we need to criminalize drug use to save the next generation because those drugs are in our schools. Madam Speaker, if the point to saving lives, we need to criminalize the use and possession of illegally obtained weapons. Madam Speaker, if it's to save lives, then why hasn't done it in all those other states? I want to save lives too, Madam Speaker. I want to have an open and honest debate.
The Speaker's time has expired. Further remarks? Seeing none, the question before the body is final passage of Substitute House Bill 1240. The Speaker is about to open the roll call machine. The Speaker has opened the roll call machine. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? The Speaker is about to lock the roll call machine. The Speaker has locked the roll call machine. Will the clerk please take the record?
Madam Speaker, there are 55 yeas, 42 nays, 1 excused.
Having received a constitutional majority, Substitute House Bill 1240 is declared passed.